Revenge with Karen.
Let me make this simple, Derek said, leaning back in my chair, with that smug, baby-face grin he'd perfected at prep school, or wherever nepotism sends its larvae these days. We don't need incompetence slowing us down. You're done. I didn't flinch. Just stared at him like you'd look at a squirrel holding a match near a gas can. HR was in the corner, tending to take notes while sipping their $7 cold brew like they were watching a reality show. A couple of interns were peeking over their laptops, pretending not to eavesdrop. I didn't give them a show. I stood, adjusted the cuffs on my blazer, took the ceramic mug I'd brought from home, none of those passive-aggressive world's best analyst mugs, and walked out. No crying, no yelling, no I gave this company 17-year speech, just the clean sound of my heels clicking down the hallway as Derek shouted after me, "You'll be begging to come back by Monday." Oh, honey. The only thing I'd be begging for was a front-row seat to his public execution by audit. Look, if you're still listening, do us a solid, tap that subscribe and like. I know, everyone says it, but 95% of folks just lurk in the shadows like budget cuts in Q4. Help us out, fuels the team, and helps us keep delivering these chaos-coded corporate truths. Anyway, by the time the elevator doors closed, I already had my personal laptop open. I'd kept a digital separation plan in a file labeled conference recipes, because corporate security audits are thorough, but not that thorough. Inside were time-triggered scripts, credential expiration controls, and just enough reminders to myself that, the event I ever got fired without a proper reassignment protocol, the system would quietly implode behind me. I didn't need revenge. I had regulations. You see, Derek, may his PowerPoint crash mid-presentation, didn't read the compliance chain. Because if he had, he might have noticed that I wasn't just Patricia from compliance. I was the designated federal compliance officer for all 5 of our regional branches. Not the backup, not one of many. One, my credentials were tied to multi-state licenses, and those licenses were tethered to a centralized audit pipeline I personally built back in 2014 when our expansion began. No Patricia, no pipeline. No pipeline, no clearance. No clearance. No investors. Back at my apartment, I set the kettle on, fed my cat, Kevin, named after an old boss who tried to expense a yacht party as client retention, logged into the federal oversight portal. Sure enough, no reassignment request had been submitted. Perfect. I clicked one button, lock handover credential pathway. Just a policy formality, nothing dramatic. It would simply trigger an automated request asking for the designated officer to be revalidated within 72 hours, or the system would begin escalation. Then I opened our internal audit prep dashboard, what Derek had called some checklists and templates, ran my last clearance override. It shut down the audit preview mode for anyone not holding credentialed clearance. There were 2 names on that list, mine and mine. When Derek found out, he'd probably call IT, then legal, then HR. He'd blame glitches, blame me, but the system wouldn't respond to blame. Just protocol, cold, government-issued protocol. I poured my tea, added a splash of oat milk, opened the group chat with my former team, not to gloat, just to leave one final message. If anyone needs me, I'll be unavailable during non-compliance season. Good luck. Then I logged out. By Monday, there'd be whispers, but I wouldn't be anywhere near the building. Let Derek enjoy his new chair. He'd better fasten the seatbelt, because the countdown had already begun. The morning after my termination, HR sent a chipper little email to my personal inbox. You finalized your separation. Thank you for your contributions and best of luck. Attached was a PDF with my final paycheck breakdown, a generic non-disparagement clause, and an offer to stay in touch on LinkedIn. Bless their hearts, they had no idea they'd just removed the keystone from the compliance arch. By noon, Derek had proudly revoked all my system access like he was flipping off a light switch. And maybe to him, I was just that flicker in the background of his nepotism-lit empire. He moved fast too, removed my name from the org chart, rerouted my email to an intern named Braden, who once asked if SOX was a laundry acronym, and even replaced my company bio with a JPEG of a puppy under the header New Chapter. Bold move, considering he hadn't even glanced at the federal compliance portal. You'd think someone, anyone, would have paused to ask, wait, exactly signs our regulatory filings again? But no, in their eyes, I was just the paper pusher, The lady with the glasses who talked too much about jurisdictional variance and once said no to bring your reptile to work day on account of OSHA rules. I was beige wallpaper to them. Except beige wallpaper doesn't hold the master key to the fire alarm. I took a cab downtown that afternoon, not to cry in a bar, not to get even. I had a meeting with my attorney, Grace, a woman who wore monochrome power suits and once made a lobbyist cry before dessert. We didn't meet to sue. I don't sue people who implode on their own. I just wanted confirmation that if the system started to break, and it would, I was indemnified. That no legal blood would land on my shoes when the regulatory floodgates opened. Grace, read the clause out loud, slow and deliberate. All federally recognized compliance certifications held by Montgomery, Patricia C., shall be considered nullified upon termination without formal reassignment or transitional appointment of equivalent credentialed authority. In short, they needed me. Not in theory. In writing. In Government Inc., and Derek, bless his click-happy fingers, had deleted the one name standing between the company and a noncompliance designation. She looked up and smiled. You're bulletproof. Good, I said. I plan to do absolutely nothing, but I want to make sure they feel everything. Back at home, I pulled up the public-facing audit registry. It's dry stuff unless you know what to look for. I scrolled to the section labeled Authorized Signatory, Compliance Oversight Multi-Regional Licensure. My name stared back at me. No backup, no secondary. Just Patricia Montgomery in blue font, last verified 6 months ago. Derek had never updated it, probably didn't even know it existed. It wasn't a checkbox in some software, it was a line in a federal database. The company had 72 hours to assign someone new before the system assumed abandonment of oversight. The countdown had already started, and with each passing hour, it would escalate, first internally, then up the regulatory ladder. I made no calls, sent no texts, even vent on social media. I just turned the page on my legal pad and wrote 2 words in capital letters. Let burn. Let them believe I was gone. Let Derek assume he'd scared off the dead weight. Let HR pat themselves on the back for streamlining old infrastructure. I wasn't gone. I was the silence before the sirens, and they were about to hear every one of them. By Friday, Derek was already peacocking through the office like a rooster on espresso. According to a friend still on the inside, let's call her Danielle, he held a little leadership huddle in the break room where he reportedly said, "Give it till Monday." She'll come crawling back when she realizes no one else wants a washed-up rulebook librarian. Ah yes, because clearly, in Derek's world, compliance officers are just jilted receptionists waiting by the phone in sad cardigans, begging to be rehired so they can alphabetize paperclips. What Derek didn't know was that while he was practicing his keynote for Investor Week, I was updating my LinkedIn with surgical precision. New headline, Regulatory Consultant, Audit Risk Mitigation Specialist. I even uploaded a photo with better lighting and a blazer that didn't scream, been here 17 years, and I know where the bodies are buried, even though I did. Within hours, recruiters started circling like buzzards at a buffet. I ignored most of them, except one. A mid-sized firm in Boston, tech-adjacent with fingers in healthcare logistics, sent me a message, short-term compliance strategy role, advisory only, no relocation. I said yes before they finished typing. Not for the job, I didn't even intend to do anything. I just wanted a new company tag on my name when the inevitable panic calls came in. Let them think I'd moved on. Let them believe I was unavailable, because that's when people want you most, when they can't reach you. Meanwhile, back at corporate, the cracks were starting to show. The pre-audit system, bless its robotic heart, had a neat little feature I helped design back in 2016 after we almost got flagged for expired licensure in Nevada. It cross-checked signatory authority with active logins. If a mismatch lasted more than 72 hours, it would flag the entry and lock the associated audit fields. Was starting now. Danielle forwarded me a screenshot, half-blurred, error, no valid signatory credential on file escalation level 1 initiated. Apparently Braden, the intern now heroically filling my inbox, had emailed IT, "Hey, something's up with the compliance dashboard." Whole thing's red, Derek's response, "Ignore it. The system always bugs out before an update." Sweet child. That wasn't a bug. That was the sound of a trapdoor creaking open. By Sunday evening, they'd bumped up the investor call with the audit board, moved it from next week to Tuesday morning. Why? Because one of the investors, some aggressive bulldog from Connecticut who treats SEC clauses like scripture, had requested to verify audit integrity before funding round 3. Translation: they were going to ask very direct questions, on record, with receipts. And as of that moment, there were no receipts. There was only a ghost, woman named Patricia Montgomery, who no longer answered her old extension, whose credentials still lingered in federal systems like the smell of burnt popcorn in a break room microwave, whose name lit up audit logs like a Christmas tree no one could unplug. Me. I didn't reach out, didn't call Danielle back. I simply made a cup of tea and reread the onboarding documents from my new consulting role. Boston company had no clue they were part of a bigger play, and honestly, they didn't need to. I had no plans to invoice them, no projects to complete. I just needed a title. That title would sit neatly next to my name when the investors typed it into the Federal Registry. And when they saw I was already advising elsewhere, they'd draw their own conclusions. She didn't get pushed out. She got poached. Let Derek try to explain that. Let him smirk his way through a live queue and a when the audit board asks, who holds current compliance authority over your multi-state filings? Spoiler, it ain't Braden. I didn't crawl back by Monday. I never looked over my shoulder, because by then, the fire had already started, and I wasn't walking into a trap. I was watching the match burn down from a safer zip code. Monday morning opened like any other disaster, quiet, overcast, completely unaware of the seismic shift about to rip through the floor tiles. By 9:14 a.m., Derek received the first official tremor. An email from Marlene in compliance, middle manager, clipboard type, always smelled like dry erase markers and nerves. The subject line simply read, "Urgent audit system field errors." He didn't open it right away. Too busy doing a walkthrough with 2 junior analysts, giving them a pep talk he probably heard in a Mark Cuban interview. Success is about hunger, not handbooks. The irony being, had he ever opened a damn handbook, he might have noticed the one titled Federal Audit Oversight, Chain of Credential Custody, authored by yours truly in our internal documentation hub. But Derek, being Derek, thought policy was a speed bump, not a cliff's edge. By 10:06 a.m., someone finally got his attention. Derek, I want to see this," said Travis from IT, holding up his tablet like it was a crime scene photo. Derek rolled his eyes, snatched it, and squinted. Lines of red, system error codes, blank fields, missing signatories. At the bottom of each alert was the same name, P. Montgomery, authorized signatory, status, deactivated. He blinked. Why is her name still in there? Because she was the credential, Travis said. The system doesn't just delete that. Well, override it. Derek snapped, already walking away. You can't, Travis called after him. That's not how federal clearance works. Marlene's email finally got read after the third nudge. It confirmed the same thing. 5 out of the 8 key audit fields were locked. They couldn't input projected figures, verify documentation trails, or simulate clearance paths for the investors. The system was choking on its own redundancy, looking for an operator that no longer existed. Derek gathered his compliance leads in conference room B, one of the ones with the sad little glass wall that let everyone watch the chaos like a zoo exhibit. He tried to play it cool. She was just a checker, he said, lounging back in the chair he liked to spin during meetings. She filed forms, ran reports, nothing critical. A low cough came from the end of the table. It was Jonah, the only compliance officer old enough to remember the last major audit scare, one Patricia had pulled them out of like a war medic. His glasses were fogged from the walkover, and he cleared his throat again before speaking. She authored the current audit playbook, including the credential ladder and incident cascade protocols. Okay, but she didn't run the audit, Derek said, waving it off. Jonah adjusted his frames. She was the audit. Silence. A younger analyst whispered, should we maybe reach out? Ask her how to reset the handover path. Arlene nodded slowly. Yeah, we could do it quietly. Just feel her out. It might be fixable if no, Derek cut in. Hard, loud enough that even the intern taking notes flinched. She walked. She doesn't get to come crawling back in as the hero. She's not crawling, Jonah muttered under his breath. Derek either didn't hear it or chose not to. We'll have IT spoof a patch and reassign credentialing manually. If they don't let us, legal can argue transitional oversight. We don't need her. He ended the meeting there, brushing past Marlene like she was a smudge on his shirt. But outside that glass wall, the whispers had already started. People were Googling Patricia's name, clicking into the Federal Audit Registry, seeing her signature, her face, her new title at the Boston firm. And every time they looked back at Derek, It wasn't with admiration. It was with the kind of dread you feel when you realize the person steering the ship just dropped the map overboard and called it streamlining. Because deep down, they all knew. You can't override a locked system when the key packed up her mug, put on lipstick, and walked out without looking back. Tuesday, 6:02 a.m. I was sitting on my balcony, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like lavender and 2007 divorce trauma, sipping burnt diner coffee like it was fine wine. The city was waking up, birds chirping, trash trucks roaring in me. I was watching the fallout brew like a storm cloud over a corporate golf tournament. Then it came. A soft ping from my laptop. Federal oversight notification. Compliance flag escalated, no current designated officer on file. That was it. That was the moment the machine officially noticed I was gone. Up until now, the system had been politely nudging. Now it was escalating, climbing its own internal protocol ladder like a fireman with a grudge. I took another sip of coffee. No need to panic. I'd built this thing. I knew every rung, every clause, every digital tripwire. The system had entered stage 2, clearance withdrawal notification. That meant automated alerts were en route to any listed stakeholder above a certain clearance level, namely the CEO. And just like clockwork, halfway across the Atlantic, the CEO's in-flight Wi-Fi choked out a single encrypted message from the Office of Federal Audit Verification. Clearance revoked, no signatory on record. Immediate attention required. His assistant, a man named Neil who dressed like a spreadsheet and breathed like a yoga instructor, opened it first. He didn't understand all of it. Nobody in those circles really does. The words "missing designated officer" made him sit up straighter in his recliner seat and mutter something about legal liabilities. The CEO was asleep under a Ralph Lauren travel blanket, dreaming of stock buybacks and steak dinners with hedge fund vultures. Neil gently shook him awake. "Sir, there's been a development." Half an hour later, somewhere over Newfoundland, the CEO was reviewing the situation on his tablet, face getting tighter by the frame. Plane banked left. He told the pilot to prep for an early landing. Back in my apartment, the kettle whistled. I didn't move. Grace, my attorney, the one who could smell legal malpractice from 3 counties away, was already composing the email we'd discussed. She sent it at 7:31 a.m. on the dot. No flourish, no grandstanding. Just a bulletproof subject line, Employment Clause 14B, Credential Custody Notice. And in the body, one short paragraph. As per Clause 14B of Patricia Montgomery's employment contract, any termination executed without formal reassignment of federal compliance credentials triggers an automatic breach notification to governing oversight bodies. Attached is the signed document. Notification timestamp logged. You are advised to resolve this breach immediately to avoid escalation under Code 9.12b. She CC'd no one, no firm logos, no letterhead theatrics, just a quiet ping in the CEO's personal inbox, the one only 3 people on Earth had access to. We weren't trying to get rehired. This wasn't a negotiation. This was the equivalent of tossing the owner's manual into the burning engine compartment and watching the dashboard light up like Vegas. At corporate HQ, the walls were starting to sweat. Jonah from compliance had just sent his 3rd Slack to legal with no response. Marlene tried rerunning the audit prep software again and again, hoping it would magically update itself. Derek, he was somewhere pacing, shouting into a Bluetooth earpiece about ungrateful former employees and data migration delays. A junior associate asked if they should notify the investors ahead of time. Derek barked, "Absolutely not. We don't show weakness." Meanwhile, different alert was popping up in the shared legal inbox. Third-party registry access attempt denied. Signatory verification failure. Translation, they couldn't even view the files anymore, not without me. The CEO's jet touched down at a private airstrip just outside Dulles. He didn't wait for his car. He called Neil from the tarmac. "What's the actual risk level?" Neil, now trembling slightly, replied, "Sir." They used the phrase federal breach. The CEO didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then, with the grace of a man who just realized the valet handed him the wrong car, he muttered, "Pull her file." Now, by the time he reached the office, Grace's email had been printed, highlighted, and placed on his desk alongside my full HR dossier. And somewhere, buried halfway through page 3, underlined in red, the words, "Credential removal without reassignment constitutes formal breach of federal compliance policy." The audit board call was still set for the next day. And as far as they knew, the company had no oversight officer, no clearance, no Patricia. But oh, they had a clause, and it was about to eat them alive. The CEO walked in like a man who just watched his retirement fund light itself on fire. The elevator dinged. You could feel the air pressure in the office drop 3 degrees. No rolling suitcase, no coat, just a face that said someone was about to be vaporized, and a fist clenched around a manila folder like it contained either a confession or a gun. "Where is he?" he barked. Neil pointed down the hall toward the glass conference room where Derek was holding court, arms outstretched, some poor intern nodding like a bobblehead. The door flew open. "Derek." "Hey, you're back early." Derek grinned like that would soften anything. "Look, don't worry, we had a little hiccup with the, why the hell did you terminate Patricia Montgomery?" The room froze. Even Derek paused, caught mid-gesture, his fingers dangling like broken antennae. "She wasn't that important," he finally said, casual as a guy ordering a latte. "Just did reports and cross-checks. We needed to modernize, lean out some of the, dead weight." The CEO didn't blink, dropped the folder on the table. It hit with a thwack so loud the intern startled and spilled a little LaCroix. "You read this?" Derek squinted. "Her file? I skimmed it. HR gave me the green light." "You skimmed it," the CEO repeated slowly like he was trying to confirm whether Derek had just confessed to manslaughter or tax fraud. He flipped it open. Page 1, Patricia C. Montgomery Senior Regulatory Oversight Officer, federally certified. Page 2, Primary Compliance Signatory for multi-state licensure exclusive authorization. Page 3, a tidy little clause boxed in corporate blue. Clause 14B. In the event of employment termination, any failure to reassign federal compliance credentials to an equivalently credentialed individual prior to departure shall constitute a breach requiring notification to applicable regulatory authorities. The CEO read it out loud. No shouting, no dramatics, just a voice carved from cold steel. Derek tried to recover. "That's boilerplate. Legal can walk that back." "No, Derek," the CEO said, voice tight, low, "that's not boilerplate. That's federal compliance. She wasn't a checklist monkey. She was the spine of our audit clearance." "I mean, IT said we could spoof a patch," Derek mumbled. The CEO closed the folder. "Hard. Do you understand what you've done? Removed the only person with credentialed authority to validate our filings. You didn't reassign her. You didn't even notify the oversight body. And now, the feds have revoked our clearance the day before the investor audit call." A long, drawn-out silence fell like a curtain. I didn't think it was," Derek tried, but even he didn't know what came after that. "You didn't think," the CEO snapped. "Walked in here playing king of the sandbox and fired the one person holding the damn floodgates." Marlene from compliance was hovering at the door now, white-faced. She opened her mouth to speak, but the CEO held up a hand. "I don't want excuses. I want solutions." "Can we reinstate her?" Marlene winced. "She's already employed. Consulting title. Different firm." Derek's voice cracked. "Wait, what?" "She updated her LinkedIn," Jonah muttered from behind the glass, clearly enjoying this like a daytime soap. "She's gone. We're on our own." The CEO turned and stared at Derek like he was trying to calculate the exact number of millions his mistake was about to cost them. And then something shifted, his anger folded in on itself. The face went blank. Quiet, corporate. He walked out of the room, left the folder on the table like a bomb with a lit fuse. Down the hallway, legal was already scrambling. Phones ringing, Slack messages firing off like warning shots. You could almost hear the audit software groaning under the weight of inaccessible fields and red alerts. The house wasn't on fire yet, but the floorboards were starting to smoke. And the man who struck the match still thought it could be solved with a patch. God help him. The building turned radioactive by noon. Legal was running point now, and you could smell the panic, sharp like ozone before a lightning strike. Conference rooms filled and emptied in jittery bursts. Nobody was finishing their coffee. Nobody was smiling. Everyone was whispering. And Derek was no longer walking tall. He was reduced to a stiff shuffle, like someone trying to sneak off a sinking ship without alerting the others. Word had gotten out. Patricia Montgomery wasn't just terminated. She wasn't just credentialed. She was irreplaceable. And now she was gone. By 12:47 p.m., HR sent out a retroactive personnel reassessment memo titled Process Oversight Revisions Immediate. Inside was a single paragraph directing all queries regarding audit credentialing to legal. Translation: they had no idea what the hell to do and were throwing paperwork at the fire. The CEO, who'd spent the last hour alternating between silent pacing and screaming into his cell phone, called an emergency session with legal, compliance, and risk. Reinstate her, he ordered. Full privileges, retroactive continuity. I don't care if you have to send a damn fruit basket. Just get her back, they tried. Oh, did they try? At 1:24 p.m., Patricia's old work email, reactivated and scrubbed, sent its first outgoing message in 48 hours. It didn't come from Patricia. It came from Grace, her attorney. Miss Montgomery is currently retained as a consultant under exclusive advisement with an external firm. She is not available for rehire. Per Clause 14b, credential reassignments must be executed prior to termination. There is no mechanism for retroactive compliance. No fanfare, no threats, just the sound of 1,000 doors locking at once. The CEO didn't respond, just stared at the screen like it had just cursed at him in Latin. Meanwhile, Derek was slowly being erased from the room. First, his invite to the 2:00 p.m. investor prep call disappeared from his calendar. Then the 3:15 with legal. Then the meeting with comms. One by one, the meetings turned gray. Someone from HR asked him, politely but firmly, if he'd mind stepping out of leadership visibility until the audit issue was under control. Visibility. That's what they called it now when they ghosted you to the basement. 2:35 p.m., Derek was sitting in a shared office that still smelled like the last intern's ramen, refreshing Slack and watching green dots disappear. People passed by his glass door and looked away. They weren't angry anymore. They were embarrassed for him. Upstairs, the CEO was briefing department heads on crisis messaging. He tried to frame the issue as a transitional compliance miscommunication, but everyone knew. Everyone had seen the Federal Registry page, still live, still branded with Patricia Montgomery's name. Her title, her new company affiliation, and beneath it, a gray tag that said, credential transfer, not filed. Someone from Risk leaned in and murmured, should we inform the investors ahead of time? The CEO paused. Absolutely not, he said. We keep control of the message. But it was too late. A junior investor, some sharp 20-something with a podcast and a $10 million portfolio, had already tweeted a screenshot of the credential gap. The tweet read, tomorrow's call should be fun. Guess who just lost their audit certification? #due diligence matters. It had 3,200 likes in under 20 minutes. Back at her apartment, Patricia was assembling a bird feeder on her balcony. Not because she cared about birds, but because peace was a discipline. Sometimes revenge tastes best with sunflower seeds and a cordless screwdriver. Grace sent her the email thread. Patricia read it once, set her phone down, and didn't respond. There was nothing else to say. The audit board, meanwhile, had rescheduled the final session. Not postponed, rescheduled with a new addition on the agenda, a live queue and a during the investor call. Unusual, extremely. Intentional, without a doubt. Someone on the board wanted answers. They wanted them where cameras would catch every blink, every bead of sweat. The call was 10:00 a.m. the next day. The company still had no clearance. The investors were watching. And Derek, he was already forgotten. Patricia wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She just didn't lift a finger to save the people who buried the knife. Bittersweet? No, it was justice with excellent posture. Final day felt less like a workday and more like the hour before a public execution. Everyone was dressed a little too nicely. Ties straightened, jackets buttoned. Even Marlene from compliance, who hadn't worn makeup since Y2K, had mascara on. Not because she cared about appearances, because it made it easier to hold her face together. In the executive suite, the CEO was burning through coffee, and antacids like it was a speedball cocktail. Spent the entire morning on calls with legal, risk, external comms, and most hilariously, an audit crisis management consultant, flown in at 4 a.m. from Atlanta, who charged $900 an hour to say things like, let's stay positive. Positive? The audit system still listed the signatory field as null. Credential reassignments were still marked as unprocessed, and every time someone tried to override the system, politely replied, authorization denied, no credentialed signatory on file. Derek, exiled to the operations bullpen, was now backpedaling so fast his chair might have rolled out the window. Still, he kept that entitled smirk on like he could grin the house back into order. It's all optics, he muttered to no one in particular. They'll see we're strong, confident, forward-thinking. Jonah, who was hunched 2 desks away, dry laughed into his coffee and didn't even look up. Around 2:40 p.m., the real panic hit. A junior compliance analyst, some poor soul fresh out of Temple University, who'd only been with the company 8 weeks, was doing final prep when he noticed something off. He raised his hand like a fifth grader unsure whether to ask for a bathroom pass or admit he'd just killed the class hamster. I think we may have invalidated the entire audit pipeline. Silence. He pulled up a screen and pointed. Last 6 months of reporting data are linked to Patricia's credential ID. All the cascading permissions, workflow validations, auto-tagged entries, archived timestamps, they all require active credential confirmation for retroactive validity. What does that mean? The CEO asked, voice sharp. It means, Jonah said, stepping in, that if Patricia's credentials are marked as deactivated with no reassignment, all of our audit trail data post-certification becomes non-compliant. A beat, so we can't submit it? The CEO asked. You can, Jonah replied, but you'd be fabricating the audit trail. Another beat, and that would be, the CEO prompted, already knowing, fraud. You could hear the building breathe in. Derek cleared his throat. Okay, but we've still got our backups, right? Legacy permissions, compliance snapshots. Jonah shook his head. Snapshots require credentialed approval to unlock. Otherwise, they're just data with no chain of custody, like unlabeled evidence in court. The CEO didn't say anything, just rubbed his temples like he was trying to knead the stupidity out of existence. Someone from investor relations poked their head in. They want a new agenda for the call, they said. Audit Board's rep is joining early. They're calling it a transparency measure. Translation: bloodbath at 10 a.m. Across the city, in a sunlit coworking space with exposed brick and plants that weren't dying under fluorescent abuse, Patricia was sipping a matcha latte and scrolling. She hadn't posted in days. Now she opened LinkedIn and typed 6 words. Sometimes your removal is the trigger they didn't bother to read. No hashtags, no tags, no explanation. The post went live at 3:09 p.m. By 3:42, it had 18,000 impressions, 173 comments, and 3 recruiters in her inbox asking if she was open to high-level advisory roles. By 4:10, a reporter from a financial compliance newsletter had shared it with the caption, "This is either the start of a corporate horror story or the most poetic resignation I've ever seen." Back at corporate, Derek was still flailing. He tried calling someone at the audit board as a courtesy, but the call never connected. Floated the idea of blaming Patricia, sabotage, he whispered, but legal shut that down instantly. Grace's email was clear. Patricia hadn't triggered anything. She had simply not stopped it. By evening, the CEO ordered silence. No more calls, no more emails. They'd ride the storm, stick to the script, and hope the audit board wouldn't bring it up on the call. But everyone in that building knew. The audit board wouldn't just bring it up. They were starting with it. Timer had hit 0. And tomorrow, the blast wave would be live-streamed. 10:00 a.m. The investor call went live with that cold, digital ping that might as well have been a starting gun at a firing squad. There were 32 attendees listed, names you see on building plaques and yacht sterns. The kind of people who smile with their teeth but never blink. The CEO opened the call from the executive boardroom, framed in front of the company logo. Posture military straight, suit flawless, voice smooth like nothing was on fire just outside the camera's view. We're excited to walk you through our Q3 trajectory, he began, and to share a preview of our next phase of strategic expansion. He was 2 sentences into his polished nothing-speak when the external auditor's tile lit up on the screen. A plain background. No branding. Just a man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses, reading glasses halfway down his nose, a stack of federal documents in front of him. His voice was calm, slow, surgical. Before we begin, he said, we need to address a regulatory discrepancy. The air in the room shifted. Per Code 9.12b, he continued, audit certification is invalid unless verified by the designated signatory on file with the Federal Oversight Registry. That signatory is Patricia C. Montgomery. Can you confirm her authorization today? Pause was a vacuum. The CEO's jaw tightened. He didn't look at the screen. He looked sideways off camera where Derek was sitting just out of frame. You let her go, he said, not a scream, not even a whisper. Just a question coded in lead. Derek, visible only in the edge of the reflection off the glass behind them, shifted in his chair. I didn't know about this, she didn't say, she didn't have to. The CEO cut in, barely holding his voice steady. Was in her file. He reached down, pulled a folder from the table, and flipped it open. The camera caught a glimpse, a contract page, highlighted clauses, her name typed clean and cold. He read it out loud. Credential removal without reassignment shall result in immediate noncompliance designation. He flipped to the final page. Her signature, dated, sealed. A line beneath it, no reassignment filed. Noncompliance risk, immediate. Silence, kind of silence that feels like pressure in your ears. The kind where no one wants to breathe too loud in case it's mistaken for guilt. Then came the voice. Not from legal, not from the auditor, from one of the investors. Someone off-screen but close to their microphone. Male, calm, is there a problem? The CEO didn't answer. He didn't blink. He just slowly turned his head toward Derek, fully now, letting the cameras see him, and stared. Derek stammered something no one could hear. A mutter, a breath. Maybe an apology, maybe just static from a brain melting under fluorescent guilt. The CEO closed the folder. Then, with the robotic grace of a man whose future just shattered in 4K resolution, he raised a hand and pointed. Not at the screen, at Derek. And then he nodded, toward the door. There was no yelling, no dramatic music. Just the sound of digital squares blinking silent, one by one, as investors left the call. Outside the room, people stood frozen near their desks, phones in hand, faces pale. The janitor stopped mopping. HR closed their laptops. Even the espresso machine stopped mid-hiss, like the building itself was holding its breath. Back at her coworking space, Patricia was folding her laptop. No grin, no fist pump, just the stillness of a storm having passed exactly where she aimed it. She wasn't watching the call. She didn't need to. The reckoning wasn't in the broadcast. It was in the silence that followed it. And some silences echo forever. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.